1976, The White Book by Makaveli, Episode 7. The Unseen Hand. What a chapter this is. Nearly the entire chapter is outlined in this presentation. I almost feel like I'm plagiarizing. Not mentioned in this book is that The Unseen Hand is a book by Ralph Epperson. The subtitle to the book is An Introduction to the Conspiratorial View of History. The subtitle is referenced in this book, so I know the author must have read or is aware of The Unseen Hand by Ralph Epperson. But the book that this chapter references by name is None Dare Call It a Conspiracy. And while I haven't read None Dare Call It a Conspiracy, I've always heard about it. Alex Jones talks about it. But I did read The Unseen Hand, and I highly recommend it. It's one of the more informational books I've read. And None Dare Call It a Conspiracy has been referenced so many times that I also imagine that must be a quality read as well. All right, so here's The White Book by Makaveli. And then here we have The Unseen Hand by Ralph Epperson. An introduction to the conspiratorial view of history. It's got the thickness too, just like the White Book. Now, look what else we have here. Simulation theory. Reality has become science fiction. By who? Jonathan Lippy. Man, is that the guy talking right now? I think that's the guy that's making all these White Book videos. He didn't kill his audience with the thickness. And he could have. Anyway, look at that White Book. Look how worn this is already. You really might want to get this book. I mean, this book is phenomenal. An introduction to the conspiratorial view of history, and the opposite is the accidental view of history. I found this book when I found out about the letter that Albert Pike supposedly wrote to Lee Manzini or something, the one called Three World Wars, where it like perfectly described the first two world wars and what might be the third world war. The unstated premise to this book, not premise, but like thesis to this, is that all of American history is a war between the people and the banksters. Central banking. The last time was when Andrew Jackson paid off the national debt. And so 20 years from 1792 is 1812, the War of 1812. I don't remember learning anything about the War of 1812 when I was in school. What about you? I wonder who really won that war. The White House got burned down, and the central bank got another 20-year charter. And 20 years from 1812 is 1832. Who's running for president? Andrew Jackson. You want to get this book, man. This book is on some other stuff. It's written, I believe, by a John Birch Society member, Ralph Epperson. It shows central banking and communism as the unseen hand. If you're into the White Book, this, especially if you're into Ron Paul, hard money, this book will give you an insight. It's written in the 80s. And, I mean, there's so much stuff in this book. Like Nicholas Biddle, who was he? Alaska, how did we acquire Alaska? And why was it called Seward's Folly? Who was bankrolling the North and South in the Civil War? Why did it even come to a Civil War? How fitting for this chapter to be in the year 1976. It is the year of the Bicentennial, which is not only the 200-year anniversary of our nation, it is also the bicentennial of the Illuminati started by Adam Weishaupt in Bavaria. This chapter delves into the Masonic origin of Washington, D.C. Whole lot of Dan Brown, Angels and Demons, Da Vinci Code, and the Lost Symbol going on in this chapter. If you haven't read those books, you might want to check those out too, especially the Lost Symbol. The Divine Family Tree. Robert Divine, ALLIOUISIS'S Divine, Diosis Divine, and Fortunate Divine. What we know about Robert Divine, is that he was a Skywalker, a construction worker. Not Luke Skywalker, not a Jedi, but in theory, he kind of is a Jedi, depending on your view of the Masons. But he was a Skywalker, construction worker, a working Mason, and that's different from the other kind of Mason, which is, man, I forgot the name. I think it's in another slide. But he's the working Mason versus the philosophical Mason. Freemason. He studies the craft. Came to the United States via Ellis Island. ALLIOUISIS'S Divine. I do see Isis in that name. His father is Robert Divine, son Diosis Divine. Baby mama, Adriana Divine. Grandson, Fortunate Divine. Graduated West Point 1942. Joined George Patton's German campaign of World War II. Assisted the OSS, which was eventually became the CIA, and he joined into his father's Mason Brotherhood. Then we have Diosis Divine. His son is Fortunate. Mother is Adriana. Adriana died in 1967. He then moved in with his aunt Dania, and he didn't meet his father Aloysius until his mother died. Drafted to Vietnam under his father's command. Then we have Fortunate Divine. And it looks like I never wrote any notes for Fortunate Divine. So I'm all these notes here are trying to isolate and figure out who's who. I've gotten some tip-offs on who Robert Divine might be. And it was a Freemason. Actually, it might have been Aloysius Divine. We have located somebody that graduated West Point in 1942 who is a Mason. But until I have more research and confirmation, I'll reserve giving that name out. As far as Fortunate Divine, he's the cousin of Famous Game, whose father is Goodman Game. And we believe that Famous Game is Damon Dash. And Damon Dash does have a cousin who is famous, and that might be Fortunate Divine. I forgot his name. I think he's discussed in a future chapter. His name it's like Damien. And then obviously their cousin is Stacy Dash. Well, Fortunate Divine. If Fortunate Divine is Dame Dash's cousin, then Fortunate's sister should be Stacy Dash. We'll see if they're mentioned as the book goes on. When I made this slide, it was before a lot more information came to my plate. Robert and ALLIOUISIS'S Mason Brotherhood. Let the brother receive the light. Do everything in your power to preserve our integrity and tradition. Phrases from when Robert enters Ellis Island. Born again. The Green Lady's Light. Travelers. Everything and everyone moves upward. Travelers also relates to sovereignty theory, where you say that you're not a driver, you're a traveler. OSS CIA. The OSS was there to combat the manufactured communist threat in Russia and South America. In 1947, the CIA was born. Deus Menuque Jus, or Jus, God and my right. I've always heard God and country. Church of Our Lady of the Rosary of Blacks. Founded in early 1800s by a secret brotherhood of slaves who until then had been unable to pray to their Oraxes in peace. Washington, D.C. Bicentennial. The Owl. On the dollar, a.k.a. Federal Reserve Note. The Great Seal. On the dollar, a.k.a. Federal Reserve Note. The Craft. The thread that links the ancient mysteries to the modern world. The light makes everything possible. And I've heard that in some videos I've seen, that when you look at the word architect, and an architect deals with building buildings, but the word arc in architect refers to light. And when you understand atoms and subatomic particles, it's all light. And that our bodies are really holograms. It's just the illusion of these light particles rotating so fast, creating this vibrational frequency that gives us our illusion of solidity. But all of the universe, the atoms that exist, can fit in a baseball, I heard. It's the illusion of reality, but the light makes everything possible. Those that know how to control the light can control reality. In the 1660s, there was a plot of land numbered 666 and was called Rome. 100 years later, after the War for Independence, a Gaul descendant and Freemason by the name of Charles L'Enfant began plans to build D.C. on the 666 plot of land. Jones Point was the first stone laid on April 15, 1791, between 3:30 and 4 p.m. when Virgo was at zenith and stars are made of light. Washington Monument, 550-foot obelisk, the 36,000 separate blocks of granite. Capstone weighs exactly 3,300 pounds. House of the Temple, the North American headquarters of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, is also known as the House of the Temple, and is located 13 blocks north of the White House on 16th Street Northwest and Lafayette Square. Its entrance is guarded by 2 sphinxes and secured by 33 stone columns, each 33 feet tall. Inside is the bust of Albert Pike. Persephone is the Queen of the Dead, protectress of the Jesuits, the Immaculate Virgin of Rome. Symbols. All streets are an inverted 5-point star. I thought I had corrected all these slides, but I guess I didn't save it. Jupiter's earthly abode. Mouth of Baphomet rests in the Oval Office of the White House. Mind of the he-goat making known all he wished to learn. Cultural references. Hotel California. We could see why this was a cultural reference for this chapter. The interpretation given on Wikipedia is that Hotel California is a surrealistic tale in which a weary traveler checks into a luxury hotel. The hotel at first appears inviting and tempting, but it turns out to be a nightmarish place where you could check out anytime you like, but you could never leave. The song is an allegory about hedonism, self-destruction, and greed in the music industry of the late 1970s. Don Henley called it our interpretation of the high life in LA, and later reiterated it's basically a song about the dark underbelly of the American dream and about excess in America, which is something we knew a lot about. Even more fitting for the occult aspect of the White Book. On this Wikipedia article, they asked Don Henley about his lyrics where he says, "So I called upon the captain, please bring me my wine. He said we haven't had that spirit here since 1969. And then the interviewer says, I realize I'm probably not the first to bring this to your attention, but wine isn't a spirit. Wine is fermented. Spirits are distilled. Do you regret that lyric? And Henley must have had the guy ask him that. Like this seems like a total setup question, because he responds with, yeah, thanks for the tutorial. And no, you're not the first to bring this to my attention. And you're not the first to completely misinterpret the lyric and miss the metaphor. Believe me, I've consumed enough alcoholic beverages in my time to know how they are made and what the proper nomenclature is. But the line in the song has little or nothing to do with alcohol or alcoholic beverages. It's a socio-political statement. My only regret would be having to explain it in detail to you, which would defeat the purpose of using literary devices in songwriting and lower the discussion to some silly and irrelevant argument about chemical processes. So, spirits, alluding to spirits. And I'll say this as well regarding spirits, demon worship, Satanism, and music. You know, as a kid, a lot of these songs like Led Zeppelin and Hotel California, Murder Was the Case by Snoop, the kids I knew at school were bonkers for this stuff. I I mean, I always felt that Snoop had so many better songs and music videos, but Murder Was the Case video, the kids were nuts for that. And so I'm like concerned, afterwards, after researching Makavelli, I saw that, the Makavelli 38-part series on YouTube. And they pointed out that the music video has Snoop like being mesmerized by this demon. And it's like this whole satanic initiation ritual. And the kids love that. For me, it was always irrelevant to me. And it's kind of like the way Jay-Z is depicted of seeing all the religious symbols and being just totally mesmerized by it. The kids at school were the same exact way. For me, just flew over my head. But now I know. Brazil, Salvador, 1957. Diosis asks Adriana to hear the story of the unseen hand. Harlem, 1976. ALLIOUISIS'S comes home to the Empire State. Does empire refer to the Roman Empire and the nation state? Scotland, 1946. This is a scene from when ALLIOUISIS is initiated into Freemasonry. 7 miles outside of Edinburgh is a 500-year-old Rosalind Chapel constructed around 1346. New York's Old Holland Lodge. Grandmaster gives a speech. As members listen, he tells the story of their history. The Grandmaster's speech. 1118. The beginning. They lent money for wars. When the countries couldn't pay, land and property was gained. Became the first safe deposits, or invented the first modern banks where you deposit money in one country or land and withdraw in another for a fee. Origins of Freemasonry continued. 1207. Had a fleet of ships for trade. In 1240, known as privateers, not pirates, but they would take over ships. The Jolly Roger. Skull and crossbones became notorious on the high seas. Makes you wonder about the Oakland Raiders. People complained, but since they owned so much land by that point, nothing could be done. The Knights Templar became the wealthiest order in the world. In 1307, King Philip owed them money. Path to destruction. Rumors of heresy, homosexuality, Satan worship, secretly practicing magic learned from the Semites during Crusades. Sitting Pope Urban II dealt with the above charges. There were 20,000 members. Where Friday the 13th originates from. Friday the 13th, October 1307, King Philip ordered all knights in France arrested and detained for their assets seized. 1312, Pope Clement V issued the decree of Vox Clamantis, dissolving the order. March 14th, 1314, Grandmaster Jacques de Molay was burned alive in the square of Notre Dame. Some Templars escaped France with their ships filled with the treasure of all treasures. 1717, Mother Grand Lodge of England formed. Templars renamed the Fraternal Order of Free and Accepted Masons. Notable members mentioned by the Grandmaster. Priory of Sion founder Godfrey de Bouillon. King Baldwin II of Jerusalem, who's his nephew. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. André de Montbard, first Grandmaster. Henry St. Clair, 9 Christian soldiers. Why no names? King Solomon's Temple. The Poor Knights of the Temple of Solomon. Working Freemasons, speculative Freemasons. Working Freemasons are those who do traditional Masonry. Speculative Masons are those based on the study of history, philosophy, astrology, mathematics. They flourished during the Age of Reason. Secret handshakes, secret passwords. The York Rite, the Scottish Rite. York Rite has 13 degrees. Scottish Rite has 32 degrees with an honorary 33rd degree. Past the 33rd degree is the Illuminated Masonry. Albert Pike was the Grand Commander. Freemasonry has 2 doctrines, one concealed and reserved for masters. The other is for the public. And this is a quote by Albert Pike, which makes you wonder that all the information we have must be the information for the public and not for the masters. Notable U.S. Masons listed in the chapter: Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Benedict Arnold, Samuel Colt, Harlan Sanders. Did you think you'd encounter this information in a book supposedly about TUPAC? Anyone that doesn't have this book and is following along solely through these videos must be like, what the WTF? And looking at the title of the video, making sure they're on the white book. So far, we've been through 7 videos and TUPAC is mentioned once so far. I ain't mad at you. I think it's a trip what is taking place, and we're getting to discuss these ideas in a video at a time when searching for Illuminati on YouTube is at an all-time high. It all just sneaks on you. If you flip through this book, you'd probably miss it. And keep in mind, this was published in 2007, and this kind of information wasn't as popular on YouTube until more present day. Maritime Admiralty law, statutory law, common law, and sovereignty. I'm curious to find out if this book delves into that. I'm wondering because I've seen some words like person, traveler, and other legal terms, and I'm just wondering to see how that plays out. I'll see you in 1977. Sub this channel, like, dislike, share it, favorite it, comment, any comments, especially for this chapter. You could add anything in you want. This obviously is a chapter with lots of information. I don't think I did it justice in this video. You might just want to read chapter 1976, either in the book or online. Just consider this a Cliff's Notes. And there's even more chapters like this up ahead, it seems. I just wanted to commend the author, not just for this chapter, but for producing a book that is so vast in its scope. There's just been so much information condensed into such small time through storylines, and the ability to construct short stories that are all interconnected is definitely a sign of writing supremacy. I'm just really impressed so far. I'm still reading because I just can't wait to see what I learn next and how everything all interconnects. I'm on Facebook, Jonathan Lippy. I'm on Twitter at Jonathan Lippy. You get my books on Amazon, my CD, Mind Over Matrix, and I made a DVD called Confessions of a Made Man with Northern Lights Nation's frontman cartoon. You can get that on Amazon as well. Thanks for watching. See you in 1977.